everybody, I thought that I would show you a tutorial on how I made this painting. So I'm going to start by saying that the colors are all in the description box. I'm going to dip with my 12 flat brush into the Dioxide Purple and dip a corner of my brush into the black and make a mixture. We're going to spread this across the top. Now I am going to use some water to thin it out a little bit. Normally I would tell you to use quite a bit of paint when you're first putting it on. I had to use water because the paint that I have is rather old and I don't have a lot of the purple to spare, so I was trying to make it stretch. So that's why I'm using the water. I would suggest that if you have the capability to use just a little bit more paint on your brush so that when you're blending, it blends very nicely. So now I'm adding some more Dioxide Purple into my mixture, and I'm putting that just below the dark tone of the purple, and I'm putting it on as thick as I possibly can. Because we're going to start going straight into the Dioxide Purple and adding another layer underneath that. Once we have the paint on there, I'm stroking from side to side to eliminate any brush strokes that you would see in the middle of the canvas. Now I'm going into the straight purple color, adding another layer, and again blending. Once you get a good solid line of the purple and it's blended nicely, you can add a little bit of white to the brush and then mix it in and lighten up that purple just a little bit and add another layer going down. So you can see this is creating like a gradient color. And we're going to do this all the way to 2/3 of the canvas before we stop. And we'll continue to do that each little part by part until we reach about 2/3 of the way down the canvas. Now you will notice that I did not quite go 2/3 of the way, and honestly it was just a lapse of concentration that made me missed the mark on that. It would have definitely made a decent difference if I would have gone 2/3 of the way down the canvas. So I would highly recommend doing that. So yeah, just keep adding that white to the mixture so that you keep getting a lighter and lighter shade, blending it in, and work your way down to 2/3 covering the canvas. Then what we're going to do is we are going to rinse the brush and dry it off once with the paper towel until there's no more like significant amount of purple coming through the brush. And then I'm going to make a green mixture. I'm going to start with the darker side, which is going to come from the bottom up. So I'm going to take a scoop of the green and a corner scoop of the black, and I'm going to mix it all together. And this will be the bottom portion, so I'm going to start at the bottom, and you can't see it on my screen because I kind of put the shot out of frame, but I start at the bottom from corner to corner, going side to side, and then I'm going to add just a touch of green to the mixture to lighten it up just a little bit. Add that layer on top and blend it in. I also added just a tiny bit of blue. Originally I thought that I would make the bushes in the picture like a straight green without any blue tints, and then I wound up adding blue anyway. So I would really suggest that if you were going to do one, add blue to the grass and then leave the bushes green. Don't add any blue to that. So we're just going to do the same thing on this side, is just working it up and going lighter and lighter until you get to the straight green color. And then I think I add some white. Yep, there I go. Adding some white in to get a grayish green color. And just continue that until we meet the horizon line. I made it a very intentional point to have a stark cutoff of the grass. It was intentional. So what you see me doing here is really just trying to make a straight line, not like perfectly straight, but just so that like there's no, you can't see any of the sky shining through the grass, and you can't see any like spaces in the grass. So now I'm adding some white to some green, and I'm going to make that my top part. And that will be it for the grass. So you just let this dry out, and this is going to be your background. Okay, now that our canvas is completely dry again, I'm taking a toilet paper tube. Yes, I said toilet paper tube. And we are going to trace with a white graphite pencil at the very top. And then we're going to taper it down and draw 3 more circles. Try to be as light as possible because you are going to erase some of it later. And kind of make it almost like a triangle. I was trying to make it look circular, but it just, no matter how I did it on all of the practice ones that I did, I couldn't make it look like the circles were going in a circle. It always wound up looking like a triangle. So that's how it's going to be. So I was fine with that. And then you're going to draw 3 more on the other side. And these are going to be the basis for your moons. Once you have your moons penciled out, you're going to mix a little teeny tiny little dip of the black with the white to make a very, very light gray. We never want to really do like stark white unless we are doing like, even in rose mulling, we don't use stark white. So the first top moon you're going to fill in all the way. You're going to make it completely circular. And this is just giving your moon a base coat. So we're going to add all of the little craters and everything later. But you just give it one good base coat. And then to do the moons right next to the full moons, you are going to start almost like at a just above a 9 o'clock placement on the moon, and you're going to first kind of trace around the exterior and bring the brush all the way to about a 5 o'clock so that moon is pretty full, but there's a little part going in, and then you just trace in the insides to make a crescent shape and fill it in. And when we move on to the next moon, instead of starting at like the 9 o'clock, we're going to start about the 11 o'clock, maybe 10 o'clock, and make sure that we make that point a little bit thinner than the last. So the crescent shape is going to be a little bit thinner as well. And so we just fill that in. And then the last one, you want to start at maybe, did I say 10 o'clock before? I think we started, because that looks more like a 10 o'clock. So then you want to start at 11 o'clock and make the point as thin as you possibly can, and then fill it in just slightly so that you have a small crescent. And then you're going to do the exact opposite on the other side. Okay, now that we've got all of our crescent bases drying, we are going to focus on the bushes down in the grass. So I take just a tidbit of black, I put it into the green, and then I took some blue and mixed it up with the green. Now, like I said before, I actually think that we should have stayed with doing green and black and not included any of the blue, because I added blue to the grass and I think it would have stood out more. So we're just going to kind of pitter-patter our way through on the edges, building a bush out. And as long as you're just kind of, making the shape what you envision it, kind of just moving your brush every once in a while to give some versatility to the leaves and whatnot. You can make it any shape that you want. I would definitely move your bushes to go up past the horizon, and then make some points of it coming out into the grass, leaving space in the middle there for your tree. Once you get the base color down, you are going to add the next layer of color. I don't know why I rinsed my brush. It wasn't necessary to rinse my brush, but I did. And you're going to add some white to that color that you just made. Lighten it up and apply some highlights in the same exact way that you applied the base of the bush. Okay, so now I'm going to grab my size 6 round brush, and I'm going to create a mixture for my tree trunk. And that mixture is just a tad bit of black along with burnt sienna. And once I get my brush filled, then I'm going to start smack dab in the middle of the grass, straight in the middle. I'm going to press my brush down all the way so that the brush fibers spread out. They kind of like look like a fan. And then I'm going to slowly move my brush up towards the middle moon, the full moon, and I'm going to lift as I'm moving up. So it's kind of like an airplane that's taking off of the canvas. It's just slowly rolling itself up until it's completely in the air. And I'm going to use the same technique for making all of the branches and twigs. I'm going to start somewhere along the trunk line to make the large branches, and then when I make the twigs, I start from the branch line, and I always start with my brush pressed a little, and then I just gradually lift up. Now there is sometimes where I make a small mistake, and all I do is, if I happened to make my twig a little bit thicker than the branch, then I just went back and I made the branch a little bit thicker. And I think you'll see later on I make the trunk a little bit thicker as well, as I'm adding highlights and shadows to it. So don't get too caught up in how your tree looks. Every tree looks different, and even if yours looks extremely unique, I guarantee you that somewhere in the world there is a tree that looks like that. You can't really mess up a tree. It's really hard to do that. So just practice that airplane type of coming off of the canvas, take off, and then add your branches and your twigs and whatnot. Okay, so now that we have majority of our branches and twigs and stuff set up, we're going to add some highlights. The first thing that I did was I went into the burnt sienna, and I just made some strokes on the major branches in the trunk. But I decided that it didn't have enough contrast, and so then later on I went into the white and I lightened up the burnt sienna just a little bit and made some highlight strokes all over the place, and you'll see the difference that created here in just a minute. I want to reiterate the branches. See, now I'm thickening some of the branches too as I do that, and that's okay. The branches, if there's branches or twigs that look too thick to be connected to whatever branch they're on, you can thicken the branch or the trunk just by adding a little bit more paint to either side of the tree, the branch in question, and it'll even it right back out. Don't worry about having a perfect tree, because if you go outside and you look at any of the trees in your area, I guarantee you none of them are symmetrical, none of them are perfect. So even if your tree doesn't look like how you think it should look, it probably does represent a tree out there somewhere in the real world. So don't worry too much about being picky. This is a practice for calming and being in the moment and enjoying the paint on the brush and going onto the canvas. Don't get too caught up in how it looks. So continuing with my number 6 round brush, I dip it into the green and we're going to make a basis of the leaves. I'm just putting light taps onto the areas where there's twigs and branches, and I extend a little bit past the twigs as well because we're standing far away from this tree, far enough so that we will not be able to see all of the tiny twigs that are actually holding on to the leaves. So I'm extending the leaves beyond where I can see the twigs in the canvas to build the base of the leaves on the tree. After I get a placement of the base of leaves where I'm satisfied, then I will add a little bit of white to add some highlighted leaves. And honestly, if I were to go back and redo this, I think that I wouldn't have chosen such a light color for the leaves. I think it would have been better to have a darker color. But I don't know. I'd have to go back and try it out. Either way, just enjoy the light tapping and adding some contrast and getting to know your tree's personality. So now I went back after I completed the highlights, and I went back and I grabbed some of the dark blue-green mixture that I had, and I kind of tapped in areas where I felt like there would be more shadows. So that was like at the base of the leaves, underneath the major umbrella part of the trees, and then a couple different parts up at the top. So now we're going to add the craters to the moon, and all you have to do is take a little bit of the black and mix it up with a little bit of the white until you get this shade that's just under slate gray. When I add the craters to the moon, I try to focus on 3 different spots that would be like the major craters, and then fill in the rest without going too overboard. So I think it gives it a nice balance that way if you stick to like 3 different places where there's going to be the major craters, and then just lightly tap a couple different other areas to make the moon look more like a moon. And do that to all of the moons until they are complete. And then we are going to go into the blue color that we used to highlight the bushes underneath. And we're going to do the same exact thing. And I'm going to stick to the large craters first, and then just do a couple of taps elsewhere to kind of balance it out. We really want some of that white to shine through so that there is some highlighted areas. So you'll see that my blue is a lot quicker to paint on rather than the gray. The gray took the most time. So we're just going to lightly dab in some of the places where there was blue or right next to the blue. And for the final highlight of the moon, we're going to go right into that light purple, which we used for our sky. And we're just going to put a couple little tiny dabs in each little moon. It doesn't have to be a lot, and it's going to be very, very subtle. So you're not even going to be able to see it on the camera, I don't think. But it does make a much better impression here in real life. I'm sorry, guys. I'm sorry you can't see it. Okay, so now we are trying to add some glow and some shadowing to each of the crescents. So I'm taking just a little bit of white pigment and watering it down and then tapping it out on the interior of the moon and kind of rubbing it with my finger. I don't really like this technique. I think it looks messy, but it's what I decided to use this time. So that's how it went. um, and it's, like I said, this is just about enjoying the paint. So I also decided to go on the exterior of the moons as well, because it does kind of give like this glowing effect. And I would refrain from doing that if I were going to do it again. I think that I would have just stuck with the glitter paint, which I'm going to use for glowing effect, and I don't think I would have put as much glowing effect as I did in hindsight. But either way, just add a little bit of the white pigment and water it down, and then kind of smear it out with your finger so it gets kind of like this shadowy look to it. Okay, so now I've grabbed my zero liner brush and I'm going into the glitter purple paint. And what I was really trying to do here was just make like a glowing aura, and it wound up being thicker than I wanted it to be. I added water because I was hoping that I could kind of get it to diffuse a little bit on the exterior so that like it looked like as you got further away from the moon, it faded. But it wasn't really cooperating with me, and so I just went with the flow and just let it complete. So hindsight now, I would just do one small line around each exterior of the moon and leave it at that. Once I completed all of the moons, I took the glitter paint once again and I added some highlights to the trees and the bushes just to show that the moonlight was hitting the items down below. And that's it. Once I had all the paint dry, I went back with my pencil and I erased any of the markings of the white graphite from the tracings of the toilet paper tube. So all of you people who stocked up on that toilet paper, congratulations, you now have a use for the tubes. Anyway, I hope that this was fun, and if you want to see more like this, let me know in the comments, because I'm trying to determine what exactly I'm going to do here with my channel. So I hope you guys have a wonderful day. May you be aware, may you be mindful, and may you be at peace.